Здравствуйте, меня зовут Чурюканова Е.О. Я являюсь доцентом кафедры английской филологии и переводоведения Государственного гуманитарно-технологического университета. И сегодня мы будем говорить с вами о британском произношении British Pronunciation Standard. So, variously referred to as Queen's English or BBC English or Oxford English, received pronunciation or RP for short is the accent usually referred to as typically British. So, it is an instantly recognizable accent often described as typically British. Sometimes it is referred to as Queen's English or BBC English, but it's not quite true. The Queen, Elizabeth II, actually speaks a very different type of English. The BBC English is another term that was appropriate at the beginning of the 20th century. Nowadays, its status is a little bit changing. What about Oxford English or Cambridge English? There is some truth in it, but still there is something that we should point out here. So we should say that received pronunciation is an accent, it's not a dialect. What's the difference here? Accent is the way in which you pronounce sounds in a language. Accent doesn't have any regional features. It is termed as regionless or non-regional. So it means that people of the whole country can understand this accent. While a dialect may have words and grammar rules unique to a geographical area, it means that dialects belong to some region, for example, Yorkshire dialect or Cockney, and it is understood in some specific area. So, what about RP, received pronunciation? We have just said that it is regionless. It means that an RP speaker from London will understand an RP speaker from Liverpool. And this is the thing why it has been chosen for teaching purposes as well. Now, while many British accents are regional, RP is a social accent. This is a very important thing when we talk about received pronunciation. Why is it social? It actually is very closely connected with the social status and education of a person. It is believed that only people who belong to upper classes and were able to study in some prestigious schools of Great Britain were taught to speak this accent. But we'll talk about this fact a little bit later. Now, while RP is most widely studied, we should say that it is not greatly used. The recent estimates suggest that only 3% of the UK population speak this accent. It has some negligible presence in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, and it's losing its status in Wales. So we should speak about the British pronunciation as not British but English. So it's most widely spread in England. We may also term it as some kind of prestigious speech. Only people of good knowledge, of good social status and background speak received pronunciation. So this is the upper class accent. But at the same time, we should note here that it is the accent on which phonemic reference of different dictionaries is also made. It is very important when we talk about the teaching function of RP accent. Most students wonder what type of accent is taught at the university. And we answer this question the following way. General American, which is the representative of classical or standard American pronunciation, is some sort of a rival with British standard pronunciation. But it is sometimes said that it is more preferable to teach British English because most dictionaries and the transcriptions in dictionaries are based on received pronunciation. Now let us say a few words about the origin of received pronunciation. So originally it was the accent of England, and to be more exact, it is Southeast England, the parts where the most famous British universities are situated: London, Oxford, Cambridge, and such famous and prestigious boarding schools as Eton and Harrow and Rugby. So this accent was originally spread in that territory, but gradually it spread further than other accents because of the prosperous trade of this region with some other parts of Great Britain. So London became the center of commerce and education, and it was forced to be the center of culture, the center of economic growth, and the accent spoken in this territory became the accent of the whole country. Of course, it wasn't done in one day. It took many years for received pronunciation to be the great part of English life. As many scientists and linguists speak about it, they say that before the 16th century, Latin was the language of culture and medicine, the language of education in general. So the scientists and teachers were forced to speak the language which was a dead language, which was not common and native for them. But it is also important to mention that due to Industrial Revolution, the new men came to the economic power in the country. They were not able to speak the language that they didn't know, Latin. So it was absolutely natural that their mother tongue, the English language, became the language of commerce as well. Now, what concerns the scientific or linguistic descriptions of the accent, we should mention the following things. It is a very young accent. It is believed that before 1757, there was no idea about the regional accent or the standard accent of the country. And the first name that we should mention here is the name of Dr. Johnson, who wrote a dictionary of the English language, and it happened in 1757. But he chose not to say anything about pronunciation. He didn't give any pronunciation suggestions. Why? Because there was little agreement on how to pronounce words correctly. So he decided to be very indifferent in this sphere. So the next person, the next linguist whom we should mention here was a linguist by name Ellis, and it is believed that he coined the term received pronunciation. Here it's important to mention what the term received means. It has the original meaning accepted or approved. It means that received pronunciation is approved by the people, pronunciation or variant of pronunciation. It is the correct variant of pronunciation. Well, but the term received pronunciation was widely accepted only when another prominent linguist, Daniel Jones, edited his English pronouncing dictionary, and it happened only at the beginning of the 20th century in 1924. So he was describing the type of the accent which was present in the speech of the representatives of upper classes. So here we are returning to the notion of a social accent. Why? Received pronunciation is a social accent. It is believed that only people of well-off families, prosperous families, were able to send their children to such prestigious boarding schools as Eton, Harrow, and Rugby. And some representatives of new merchants who were not the part of a British aristocracy but who had enough money to send their children to such school, they intended to send their children so that their children would become the part of the aristocratic youth, so that they could acquire the basic features of prestigious pronunciation. It means that when people from all over the country came to Oxford University or Cambridge, and when originally they spoke their local regional dialects, they tried to get rid of the specific regional features in order to acquire the British pronunciation standard. So this is a very important thing, that when a person speaks British standard pronunciation, it is practically impossible to guess what part of Great Britain he is from. That is why we say that received pronunciation is an accent, it is devoid of any regional features, and it is recognized as a social accent. But we should mention the following thing, that nothing remains the same, everything changes, and the attitude to norms of received pronunciation changes as well. Well, what was old-fashioned maybe several years ago, nowadays may be recognized as the norm of pronunciation. And on the contrary, what is very updated in your pronunciation today may be recognized as old-fashioned or archaic when a few years pass. At the beginning of our today's lecture, we have mentioned the fact that standard pronunciation has another term, which is called BBC English. Why is it so? Well, actually, it was the broadcaster's choice. You know, the BBC's British Broadcasting Corporation, the committee, the advisory committee of this company chose received pronunciation as the accent for giving news. Again, they decided that it should be some kind of a neutral, regionless accent. And it was again at the beginning of the 20th century, about 1920-22. But since that time, a lot of things have changed. And nowadays, they say that journalists from different parts of Great Britain and Northern Ireland do not hide their regional pronunciation features, and on the contrary, it is absolutely normal not to hide something specific, but to be the representative of such a great country which has so many types, diverse types of pronunciation. Well, now what about the Queen? Yes, Queen Elizabeth speaks standard pronunciation, but her type of pronunciation, her type of accent is very unique. A lot of linguistic information was given concerning the changes in the way she pronounces, and they say that, for example, 50 years ago, her speech, her accent was absolutely different from the way she talks now. So, of course, her type of pronunciation can be regarded as the standard that we should follow. But on the other hand, we must understand that there are a lot of things, extra-linguistic things, that may actually modify the way we speak. It depends on the social status, on the economic status, on the background and upbringing of children. Well, but so that is why nowadays linguists say that received pronunciation is not something unique. It is not something homogeneous. Received pronunciation has some features that have been changing in the course of time. That is why they say that nowadays there are 3 types of received pronunciation. The first type is called conservative received pronunciation, and it is usually associated with elderly generation and British aristocracy. The second type is called mainstream received pronunciation, and it describes the type of accent which is really neutral, in terms of regarding one's age, social background, and upbringing. And the third type is called contemporary received pronunciation. This is the speech of the younger generation, young people who are not afraid to use new words, new variants of pronouncing words. They some kind of create experiments, phonetic experiments. Well, but for teaching purposes, we choose the standard pronunciation, British standard pronunciation, which has some typical features and which differ this accent from the general American accent, as well as some other types of accents which are present in the UK today. Well, one of the features that I would like to point out is the pronunciation of the long vowel R in such words as bath, palm, dance, class. There is there is a great list of words here. Compare in American English and in some types of British variants, British regional variants, they use the sound A here, bath or dance. Another feature is the sound Y in the class U. For example, news, student. There is such a phenomenon, such a process called yaw dropping, which is typical for American variant of pronunciation as well as some other British regional variants. Instead of news, they say news. Student, student. One more thing that I would like to emphasize here is the pronunciation of the initial letter H. For example, horse, house. Compare in some local dialects, they drop this initial H, and instead of house, they say house, ors. One of the representatives of such local dialects is Cockney, which is characterized by these features. So, to conclude our lecture, I would like to point out the following fact that, of course, like any other accent, received pronunciation, RP, changes in the course of time. It is absolutely natural because it is spoken by people. It is a way of communication and belonging to such an organism as human society, which is constantly changing. The language and the accent changes as well. But we should say that we still say that we choose it for teaching purposes because it is devoid of any specific regional features. It is rather understandable. It has a long history. Well, we say that it's rather young, but in comparison with other accents, it has rather long history. And it is the base of transcriptions and dictionaries. So these are the reasons why we choose received pronunciation for teaching purposes. Well, I would like to thank you for your attention and to wish you the very best of luck. Have a good day.